Paul, we recently met at the first Foreign Affairs and Defense Policy Conference here in Barcelona. You co-organized it by the Catalan Society for Military Studies, together with the Catalan Global Institute. I think that was one of the first conferences of this sort, and it was a great success. A lot of people came, packed house, and some of the panelists were very top level. Among one of them would be Professor Dr. Lambert from King's College, one of the main naval historians in our days. So congratulations for that. We've already spoken on podcast in the past. Now, why was this conference important? And especially for people to know what this Societat d'Estudis Militars does, what's the role it plays in Catalan society today, and what's the vision for the future?
Oh, thank you very much, Victor. Actually, yes, it was quite a success. It was a pioneer event because the lack of official government papers in defense and foreign affairs. Actually, as you told, our organization tries to fill this vacuum in the area of the defense policy. We started about 11 years ago, and our main aim was that one, to generate knowledge on defense policy focused in the framework of the Catalan national interest. So we decided that there was was quite self-evident the lack of proposals on defense policy from the government, and we said that we want to fill this gap in the range of our possibilities, and we're quite proud about this. We succeeded in that, despite being a self-funded organization and non-partisan. But since 2014, it's been a long trail, but quite successful. And as we told you, we invited Professor Lambert, the leading historian on naval history at the King's College. It was quite instructive.
Mm. Yeah, I think this is one of the main lessons that we can learn from all the process leading to the referendum in 2017, the independence referendum in Catalonia. There was a lack of debate. That was for many reasons, I suppose, but one of them would be that the pro-union parties and the Spanish state boycotted any possibility for that debate to be conducted in a civilized manner, in a democratic manner. And that, of course, made both camps not put on the table their proposals in several elements of what the Catalan independence would look like. And the government did prepare sort of white paper, but they never really went into the defense policies, into the collective security. And I think that is one of the lessons to learn, because it is very difficult for you to say, we want to become an independent country, if you're not telling the world, your neighbors, the European Union, what your plan is in terms of defense, in terms of national sovereignty, and so on. So I think this gap that you're filling is very important, and it would have been great if you existed, this organization had existed 15 years ago. So what is the role that this organization has to play in the years to come?
Well, right now, with the main documents published, is to foster the possibilities of the Catalan defense models in a foreseeable future, or mainly in the first years after the proclamation of the independence, since the strategic partnerships are reached, because there are several options nowadays in the world, but in Europe and the West as well. Mainly, you have three main models: the all-volunteer force, the selective service, or the full conscription. But anyway, regardless the models that you choose, you have to be able to fill the basic capabilities, both in land, sea, air, and cyber, on all these domains, in a short time framework, less than 5 years. Actually, there are models, successful models about that. Remember the Baltic countries after splitting from the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So our main aim has to be to depict the options in the first years. Of course, it has to be the Catalan government, the Catalan Republic government, who decides which is the model to follow. But we will try to aid in this way.
That's very interesting. And one of the things that I liked about this book that you co-authored in 2017 is that you do lay out a first blueprint of what these Catalan Defense Forces could look like. But one of the interesting things is that you also mention the Catalan defense tradition and history. And I think that is one of the things that a lot of Catalans, and of course foreigners, don't know, is that even though Catalonia has been a country that has been occupied for 300 years by the Spanish state, it had a very strong tradition and history in defense. And of course, it's been lost through the years. But can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Actually, Catalonia appears as a buffer state of the Carolingian Empire. So the very notion of war was something that the population was used about this. But you were in the border, so you fight. And this permeated in the whole culture of self-defense of the Catalan people. But in the political culture as well, one of the most renowned things of the Catalan political culture is the pactism. This is derived from the Princeps Nanque law that was a kind of tradition that said that the Catalan subjects could not be conscripted for foreign wars. In case of aggression, they were obliged to serve the king in the war effort, but not in foreign wars.
And I imagine this was totally different from other countries where if you were conscribed, you go to war, whatever the king says. Napoleon would be a case, right?
For example, but well, it's a little bit different because we are talking about the Middle Ages. But the Catalan expansion in the Middle Ages was due this kind of pactism because the king needed, like in every war, you need men and you need money. So you need to pact with your people and the nobility as well. So here mixed both trade interest and heritage interest from the nobility and the king, but should respect less manner the religion because the Catalan expansion was more due national interest than religion. And was blended as well with not only with the military arm, but with diplomacy, with the sea consulate. That was a kind of diplomatic loyalist approach to the expansion that went hand in hand with the trade.
Of course. And I think some people, when they think of a new state and a state that does not have its own army or defense forces, and that will have to be started from scratch. So a lot of people are going to say that's going to cost too much money. That could be one of the things, one of the counter arguments. But if we still in history, we do have another example of a time during the Spanish Civil War where the Catalan government had to very quickly prepare a defensive force and a defensive industry, right?
Yeah, right. It was a quite a notable achievement because the Catalan government, in the middle of the chaos of the revolution, organized both recruiting, education of officers and NCOs in less than 6 months, and organized as well the defense industry effort from the civilian production to the military production, both ammunition, weapons, armored vehicles, including gas masks. All such an effort was achieved in the middle of the chaos of the revolution. So it's not so difficult if you have good plans and a government determined to go all the way.
That's important. And another of the topics we were discussing before, that during the discussions leading to the referendum, there were not a lot of opportunities to explain why having an independent country for the Catalan people would be highly beneficial. I think a lot of the countries know and that Catalonia is a rich nation, and therefore it would be easy to begin a state because today there's a huge part of its GDP that goes into taxes to Spain that does not return in services or infrastructure. But when you talk about the defense, you think as I was saying earlier, you have to start from scratch. But we are already paying taxes to fund the Spanish defense budget, right? So what would you say to people who are wary about this possibility of starting a defense forces from scratch and during this first period, for example, of 10 years? How would that benefit them as people, civilians?
Yeah, well, first point, we are not paying now for the Spanish defense. Actually, we are paying for it.
We are.
Yep. And the second point, regarding the benefits in the way of jobs, for example, the defense industry. No one of the big companies of the defense material is based in Catalonia. For example, the shipyards are in Galicia and Andalusia, the armored vehicles in Madrid, in Andalusia as well, and so on with the Air Force as well.
I remember that in the book you mentioned that Catalonia represents 20% of the Spanish industry, grosso modo, and that the defense industry is only about 5%. And when you compare that with Madrid, they have 47% of the defense industry. So that is linked to direct employment, to indirect employment. There's a whole industry here that is never counted when we take into account the finances of both nations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's for some kind of mystery. It's not mentioned, and this I think that are guilty both the Catalan and the Spanish government about that. We have to be honest. But we are talking about tens of thousands of jobs that are going in other regions that are not industrial, and this is due a political decision. Of course, fortunately, the defense material is not free market, so it's the states are the legitimate buyer, and the places where the industries are placed are due a political decision. Why in Catalonia, the powerhouse of the industry in Spain, there are not defense industries?
I think it's obvious, right? But that would be a big improvement in terms of employment rates, but not only in employment rates, because of course you would also have a whole new industry that would allow the Catalan economy to diversify in a way that it would not have the current productive model, which is very tied, too tied, I would say, to tourism and low income jobs. If you had all the technology linked to the military, to the defense, to the security, that would also allow us to change the productive model, let's say.
Absolutely, that's right. There are always synergies between the defense sector and the civilian sector. For example, Sweden is quite an example about that. The SAP, the company that people knows for the cars, the 80% of the incomes are about the defense material. So why can we have our own SAP in Catalonia with airplanes, ships, and armored vehicles?
Yeah.
So the answer is a political one.
All the technological transfers that go
Absolutely.
from the defense sector to the civilian, and especially in Barcelona, which is already some kind of a technological hub nowadays, but it's still too linked to services, and usually these startups that are not linked so much to industry, which after the economic crisis or also COVID have been proven that that's what holds the country's economy and therefore the people's livelihoods, right? So that's something that we should, and that's, I think, why the Catalan Society for Military Studies is so important in the political debate. I wanted to ask you about, you've studied actually what these Catalan Defense Forces should look like. You mentioned before the different models in Europe.
Yeah.
You've compared it to the Baltic states. What should we do? The Danish approach, for example?
That could be a good option. If we project the Danish numbers to Catalonia, for the audience, Denmark has about 5.5 million inhabitants. Catalonia has recently reached the 8 millions. So, summing up both regulars and reserves, in comparison with the Danish model, we will have here about more than 20,000 regulars and 64,000 reserves. It's quite huge amount of troops, and that's important because after the ongoing war in Ukraine, everybody is seeing that the all volunteer forces are not enough. I'm not advocating for full conscription, but every state is being more aware that they have to get a more robust approach to the defense. The times of the streamlined forces that were a product of the end of the Cold War and was a logical path to follow has ended. And I think that the Danish model could be a good approach for Catalonia.
So that model would basically be you have a certain amount of people, of members that are voluntary.
Yeah, well, full-time forces.
Full-time forces, which are professional.
Yeah.
And then voluntary who are territorial, for
yeah,
example.
mainly. Yeah,
territorial. And that would be with Navy, an Army, an Air Force, cyber defense capabilities. And of course, you imagine Catalan forces engaging in peace operations in the world and part of NATO. That's
yeah, and this if we assume that we will respect the current agreements that has the Spanish state and we remain both in the European Union and NATO, this comes with several obligations. For example, the European Union has some agreements for peacekeeping or training forces in Africa, for example, or patrolling the Mediterranean. It could be another option. And the NATO as well has several duties protecting the Baltic countries, or having readiness of troops for emergencies. So we will have to honor these compromises as a responsible stakeholder. And in this way, if the Danes are doing well, and they are doing, I think that Catalonia has no limits in following that path.
Mm-hmm. Your new book, Noah Stull, that's New Fleet in English, basically that's a study of what the Navy would look like. And we were talking before about the history of Catalonia and the empire in the Middle Ages and how that was mainly a sea power. Reaching Greece, Sicily, and of course the Balearic Islands, Valencia. And so you say in your book that the best pages of our history were written in the sea. Can you explain how that is possible for a country to, because it is focused on the sea rather than a continental power, even though being a small country can have more power than its dimension would allow it, let's say? No?
Yeah, absolutely. To try to avoid to repeat again with Denmark, that is quite an example. The Danes control about 1/6 of the world container traffic, but going on the other side of the world, Singapore, for example, is it's one of the remaining city-states in the world. They are very tiny.
Yep.
They are the size of the greater Barcelona, and with less population than Catalonia, but they are a kind of small giant in Asia. They control the passes from Malacca Straits that link the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. And well, they have a sizable force of about 300,000 men, like both regular and reservists, and quite an important navy. Actually, one of the most important in the Southwest Asia, Southeast Asia. And Singapore is quite an example of an open society, respectful with human rights, and without corruption, and very committed with the world trade. So I think that could be an example.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because when we talk about independence and we compare with other small nations in Europe and how they are better managed, better ruled, there's more social cohesion than in larger countries. And in the past, having a big country gave you very clear advantages in trade and in war, of course. But nowadays, small countries are ruled better. People have a better quality of life. But now you're giving us an example of how that is also the case, not only from a financial point of view, but also from a military standpoint. And I think that's something that the Catalan public needs to know. And also the international community, right? Because we do have this tradition, this defense tradition, but we are not seen today as a stakeholder to ensure these challenges of the future, right? So I wanted to speak a bit more about these challenges of the future that you see and how Catalonia can play a role. There's climate change, there's mass migration, there's a series of terrorism, there's a series of things that we need to address, and we have to be able to tell the world we are going to be partners that you can rely on, right?
Yeah, well, actually, our strategic framework mainly is the Europe and the Mediterranean, and as you told, one of the main threats will be the problems derived from the climate change. We'll have lots of people that getting poorer and poorer in Africa due to climate change, and it will be clear that the option for them will be to emigrate. But Catalonia is supporting for decades too much immigration. We cannot allow to have 2 more millions. Of course, the Navy will rescue the people that crosses the Mediterranean. That's a moral and legal duty. But afterwards, we cannot allow everybody here. But in this way, the Catalan Navy could help to that. On the other hand, the terrorism. There are European Union and NATO naval dispositives in the Mediterranean. And another point, the illegal and unregulated fishing. That's another serious issue, both in the Mediterranean and Atlantic and the African coast. We can help them to end the illegal fishing that is provoking migrations. The fisheries in Senegal are depleted, and people are immigrating due to that. A strong navy helping them could add to mitigate these problems.
Yeah.
And I think that the Catalan Navy could help them.
Could do that because the Spanish state is not doing that. On the contrary, if you see some weeks ago, we saw in Australia the Navy not allowing a boat full of illegal immigrants trying to reach the coast, and the Navy did its job and not allowing it and blocking it and arresting the captain of that ship. Meanwhile, in Spain, we see how these boats are arriving to the Canaries, and not only that is not stopped, but the Spanish state, the security forces, they fleet flights for these people who arrive there to Barcelona.
Yeah.
So they are basically a society that in the past 10, 15 years has seen its global population rise from 6 million to 8 million. So that's 2 million. That's like 130, 140%. That is something that has not happened anywhere in any other region of Europe.
Yep.
It is absolutely anomalous situation. And we do not have the infrastructure to cope. And if you add to this situation the high amounts of tourism that we receive because our economy in part depends on it. Now you see the drought is collapsing the capacity for water, for drinking water.
Yep.
Trains are collapsing because there is no investment from Spain to invest in better infrastructure for the trains. It's been like this. It's been the case for years and years where the Spanish budget is not executed in Catalonia. They execute a certain amount, 20, 30% every year. And when we compare that to the execution of the budget in Madrid, for example, it can reach up to 120% of what was initially budgeted by the National Assembly. So we have here like a ticking bomb of elements that Catalonia needs a state to be able to address, because otherwise there will be this collapse, not only in economic terms, but also in social terms. And I think that we are already seeing this linked to the Israel and Hamas conflict. We're seeing how many immigrants are siding with Hamas, so with terrorists. And we're seeing huge demonstrations all over Europe, and that, of course, is making a lot of Europeans very worrisome of how this is going to evolve in the future, right?
Yeah, actually, that's well. There are several problems here regarding the defense. As I told you, the Navy can provide these constabulary roles. Actually, in the naval theory explained in the book, the navies have 3 main tasks. Of course, the military task. You have the diplomatic, but there is also the maritime security task. It's kind of naval police. So in this way, you can go with police duties, safety duties as well. Immigration is one of them. But this is to say that you have, of course, you have the duty of rescue the people that is drowning, but to the apprehend the mafias, all these kind of human traffickers, is the kind of slavery of the 21st century, and you have to fight that. Well, anyway, but I think it's important. The main point to keep in mind that as soon as we regain independence, we have to, as soon as possible, to develop the main defense capabilities within land, air, sea, and cyber. And we have models that we can mirror the Baltics, as I told you. And of course, there will be strategic partnerships. Well, our option is to remain as I told you, with the current memberships in EU and the NATO. But if we don't access in the future in the EU, there are other options. The UK, for example, or the United States. So, in the long run, the national interest tends to align regardless of the philias and phobias of every state. I think that with a proper government, with the proper will, we can solve everything.
Yeah, you're mentioning the UK. The UK also has a maritime strategy, which is not only based in the military, but it's like a national strategy,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Can you elaborate on what that is for the British case, but also how we could apply that as a sea power, or at least humbly saying a sea nation?
Yeah, well, actually, since the 15th, 16th century has been first England and afterwards the United Kingdom. They have been sea power based in the maritime trade, and this has political consequences. For example, with the Glorious Revolution, it's the parliament that decides appropriates a new king in order to guarantee their rights with the Bill of Rights, and on the other side you have the City of London. Their interest in maintaining that, and the Royal Navy as well submitted it all to maintain the welfare, the trade around the world, and this you have this kind of virtuous circle. This ended with the two world wars, but now after the Brexit, they are trying to reconnect with all the empire, not in the old way, but with a more democratic and less imperialistic, but based on trade. That actually was the idea that Julian Corbett has, as Professor Lambert told us. And I think that in this strategy, there are several points in which the future independent Catalonia could link with that. We have common interest based in the good order of, as you mentioned, the current ongoing war in Gaza, but it's the kind of war that could escalate, and we have seen in the Red Sea, the Houthi rebels shooting missiles, drones, and boarding ships. Well, there's a problem for everybody, regardless of the ideology. You have a vital sea line of communication there, and in serious problems. It's clear that a naval coalition will be mounted to protect the sea trade. In an independent Catalonia, of course, a responsible stakeholder will send then the ships to avoid attacks on the trade, both national or foreign, because we share interest there. It's a kind of example, but could be said the same in the Straits of Malacca, the Indian Ocean, or anywhere. And I think that in this way, with the British maritime strategy, there are some points that we can link with them.
And I wanted to ask you, recently the European Parliament passed a resolution for greater integration of the defense capabilities. Do you have an opinion on that? What should the Catalan government would you think should do?
I think that we Catalans usually try to be and to demand accountability numbers. I think that it's better to avoid duplicities. For example, if you look at the Lisbon Treaty of 2007, it appears and regarding the defense, it establishes a kind of labor division. For example, the European Union is a framework for peacekeeping, stabilization operations, and such kind of missions. But NATO is the framework for high-intensity combat missions. I think that trying to overlap one with the other, I think that's a wrong policy. But well, sometimes in the brinkmanship in policy, it's so usual, and some kind of politics or theater. I think that's what is going on in the European Union. But you will see that, for example, the Eastern Europe countries like Poland and the Baltics will oppose to that for good reasons, because their framework is NATO. They are in EU, but they want not to undermine NATO. But aside of the Baltic and Poland interest, I think that it's better to avoid duplicities and overcost.
And what do you think about the army being deployed in some countries, such as Sweden, lately linked to all this mafias or ghetto-style criminal groups? Usually immigrants that came in the past, they haven't been able to integrate, and now they are living from the criminal activity. And the deployment of the army, to make that as something normal, that's something that is, what is your opinion?
Well, that's quite a problematic question, because in a democratic country, the police defense against the inner threats, and the army, and the whole military defense against external threats. Sometimes the military...
That's what we've been taught.
Yeah,
least, right?
that's it.
Yeah.
But so it's right as well that the military could assist the police in situations of crisis.
Emergencies,
but still,
like COVID, for example. Happened,
But seeing the military patrolling the streets, that's quite another question, and a little bit riskier, because it's close to some undemocratic, unauthoritarian movements. But well, the situation in Sweden, it's almost critical, and I think that the Swedish government have good reasons to do that. I think that it will be better here to avoid such situations, to have a robust police to enforce such situations, and let the army and the whole of the military do their thing outside, or protecting against outside threats, not patrolling the streets. Maybe in some kinds of situations like forest fires or natural disasters, floodings, okay, that's normal. But seeing the military patrolling the streets, it's quite hard for me to see it.
No, I totally agree. But when you see the current situation of the police, you don't think they're able to tackle any of these incidents. And I can speak from personal experience. This in 2 months, my car was they were broke into my car 3 times in a row, and that had never happened in my city before. And now we have this new wave of immigrants, and they are attacking tourists in Barcelona, and the police seems incapable to do anything about it. This is also linked to the justice system, the collapse of the justice system, and maybe the lack of will to address these issues, because there's some kind of political interest that Catalonia and Barcelona do not have this peace of mind, this stability. And I think this is going to get worse. So how do we tackle this from, let's say, a national or regional government point of view?
Well, I think that seeing this from a kind of Spanish view, they can say, well, you see the Catalans, they cannot rule themselves and they want to be independent. So I think that the answer here is a side of trying to have more social cohesion and more robust police and security forces. But I'm trying to not be naive here. But well, if in 2 decades we have 2 million more immigrants, I think that it's not a kind of situation that goes from nothing and automatically happens. I think that there is a kind of a strategy in that.
There is.
But well, we have to overcome that and find the solutions. And you have to send that image of responsible stakeholder. Actually, in the 80s, when the second president of the Catalan self-government, Jordi Pujol, recovered the Mossos Esquadra, the Catalan police, was an important point, and the competence about the prisons was another important point. But well, I think that with the government, with the strength of will to cope with these problems, we can recover.
We're trying to learn some lessons from the past, so from this failed attempt of independence, because we know there's a huge majority still in the parliament. There's a majority of pro-independence parties. People, even though now they are protecting themselves, let's say, from the political scene, going into abstention, not voting. They don't want to have anything to do with the current political parties because they not only failed, but also, I would say, they lied continuously for the past years in what their goal was and their ambitions and so on. So basically, for the world to know and Europe to know, the Catalan problem, if you want to call it that way, will not end. We have proved that time and again. And the fact that we had politicians that were not up to the task does not mean that the new generation of leaders, of politicians, cannot learn from those mistakes. You were saying about the responsibility that we have. So what would you say that we have to also communicate to the outside world, to the tourists, to the foreigners, and also ask Catalan people in terms of this character that you need? Because this is something that I think goes from the political leadership down to the people. So there's this sort of character that we need to shape in a different way. I think that a big generation, and we can link this to the defense discussion, because, for example, the generation of my father, because they had to do the forced military service with the Spanish military, which oftentimes was very traumatic or loss of time, and that has really made the defense, the security, the military, something not very loved by the Catalans, let's say, no? And a lot of pacifist mentality also coming from the 70s, 80s, and that has trickled down until today, and we have this character that's probably not prepared for many conflicts. But when we went into the polling booths in 2017, you saw how even though the armed police constabulary came to attack unarmed citizens, people stood firm and defended their right as any normal person would do, right? Defend their country, defend their right to express themselves freely. But we do need to have this change of character. How do you think that we have to do that, and through which means?
Well, like you, I'm absolutely certain that we have a better country than their politicians. So, but there are some things that have to be changed. And the kind of mentality, you have to think about what a proper state is and what duties you have for yourself and for your neighbors. For example, well, there are two basic things, mainly the taxes as well and the security both in the domestic and foreign and external. We are in the European and Mediterranean strategic framework, and for example, if we have to become an independent state, we have neighbors. For example, not only Spain, we have France. Spain and France have defense agreements. If we split from Spain, we have to tell France that, for example, the treaty about aerospace defense that it's was dated back from the 1985. We will respect this agreement, and as soon as possible, we will develop our own air defense, and we will cover this airspace. For example, the French Republic doesn't want to know what is the current situation of the Catalan hospitals or the situation of the Catalan language. If Catalonia becomes independent, the French Republic will want to know, okay, what about the air defense and the littoral areas and the economic exclusive zones and the agreements to reach? You, independent Catalonia, will honor these agreements. Okay, so we will have to habituate to speak like a state, not like an NGO.
Yeah.
Less morality, not immorality, but less morality and more about interest. I think that this is the main change that has to be done. Another one, it's to stop thinking that the others will come to save or do your own duties. As the old saying says that the big allies help the small allies that want to help themselves. So we have to do our own homework.
Absolutely.
That's important. I think that this is the point that we have to learn of the mistakes of 2017, aside of the lack of will of the leaders. I think that with these 2 points, there is not an easy track, but the main way is provided, and we can overcome it. I'm absolutely certain that we have a better country than their politicians.
I'm convinced as well. I think that the Societat d'Estudis Militars, the Catalan Society for Military Studies, is doing a wonderful job. I hope that you can continue to do this, these conferences, writing these books, making all the military and defense culture grow. Hoping also that young Catalans will also get involved, get more knowledgeable, maybe study abroad, and in that sense build a new generation, a new, also why not, intellectual elite that is able to tackle all these problems, and hopefully have this new generation of politicians that, because this problem will not be solved, whether you have amnesty or not, we know the Spanish state, we know how it operates, and we know that any deals will not, let's say, they will not respect their word. We know that. We know that their only idea is to finish with the Catalan problem. They haven't been able to do it with absolutist monarchs for centuries. They haven't been able to do it with 40 years of dictatorship, or even more dictatorships in the past. And they have tried as well with mass immigration and with Castellanization of our culture, our education, our TVs, with the mass media, fear-mongering on the Catalan people during the referendum, and to this day with a repression of high-voltage repression on the politicians. But this has not stopped the will of the people. So I think that what you're doing is a great example.
Thank you.
And we hope that these sort of initiatives would come up not only from the defense sector. I know that also the case for the foreign affairs. So congratulations.
Thank you. And well, going all the way is just a start.
Yeah. If anybody wants to know more about what the Catalan Society for Military Studies thinks and does, they can follow them in their website, of course, and YouTube channel, where you have all their interviews in the conferences and these 2 books, especially the new one, New Fleet. So thank you, Paul, for being here.
You're welcome.